Good evening and happy Friday, everybody. This is Phil Russert and Creatorcon Q&A. As usual, we have another great guest tonight. Before we get to our guest, I do my shout outs to the usual crew. For your comic needs, we have Mad Titan Comics, _Comics. Eric Gunderson on Facebook, who is the owner and operator. We have www.lesdudis.com, LESDUDIS, Andy Lee. Everything you want pop culture and geek culture. He has a lot of great convention reviews as well. Hey, Gallo, thanks for coming out. We have a podcast. Hey, Dante, we have a podcast, Android's Amazing Podcast. They are also tied into my comic store, Android's Amazing Comics. Hey, Veer. And you can go to their website, www.androidscomics.com. Also, the podcast is on everything, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, a bunch of different places. You can go check them out. We also have Inking with Kike on Enrique Lopez Instagram page, Studio Maine, MAENEFL. It's Monday nights at 8 p.m. So please go check that out. He'll do a live inking. He has a live guest. He just had Keith Williams on. You can go back and watch prior episodes. Now that we got those announcements out of the way, and as usual in the chats, we'll have links to other people that I didn't have time to shout out, I want to introduce our guest tonight. Tonight we have a writer from DC Comics, Wonder Woman, Conan for Marvel. She has her own creator-owned series for Image, Rose. She did Xena Warrior Princess for Dynamite. And she had a fantastic book that I just read recently. It was a successful Kickstarter. It's for retail now, the Book of Ruth. This is the David Finch variant cover. She also has Lee Weeks, Jason Fabok as well, and Billy Tucci. They have variant covers. It was a very inspirational story. I really recommend everybody pick it up, and we will talk about it tonight. So without further ado, we have Meredith Finch.
Hi, everybody.
How are you?
Good. How are you, Philip?
Thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
How are things in Canada?
Calm, I think. Although I did just get notification from the school board that instead of starting school on the 8th, two of my kids are starting later, and then I think 2 days later, and then another one starting the week after. So.
Okay, well, I mean, hopefully it goes well for everybody. I have two little ones that'll be going back to school too. So we'll see. Fingers crossed, exactly. So I'm sure everybody here knows who you are. If they don't, please tell us a little about yourself.
My name is Meredith Finch. I've written Wonder Woman for DC Comics. I worked with my husband, David Finch, on that book. I actually started my career with Zenescope and did The Little Mermaid for them. You did a good job. I've done Xena for Dynamite. I've done Conan the Barbarian for Marvel. And I also did Conan, Age of Conan story, Valeria. And then my career book through Image is Rose, which I did for 17 issues with the phenomenal Ig Guara.
Nice. And of course, Book of Ruth.
And Book of Ruth.
So what inspired you to start being a writer?
Writing is something that I've always done just for my own personal expression and as a means of dealing with things, challenges, and events in my life. I always thought in the back of my mind that someday I would write a book. I would tell a story. I never thought I would do comics. In fact, when I first met Dave, he would say, "Oh, you should read this comic. You should read this comic." And I'd be like, "Oh no, honey, you do comics. I read books." We're told like they're not even the same stratosphere. You know what I mean? And then very, very good friend of mine had a very tragic accident, and she ended up breaking her neck and becoming quadriplegic.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And it was, I think, my way of sort of dealing with everything that I was going through and that she was going through, that I started writing again. And it was, I think, the first time that Dave had really been with me through that process. So I had left a book out on the counter where I was doing some of my journaling, and he picked up and he read it. And at that point he said, I really think that you need to do this professionally. I think you're a really great writer, and you have a really great way of creating a visual image. And so he approached Zenescope and offered to trade them a couple of covers if they would give his newbie writer wife a shot. And that's really how it came about.
That's really nice support. That's awesome. I have to say, as a writer, I think you're very good at pacing. Nothing drags with you, but at the same time, it doesn't feel rushed. So you're very good at pacing and getting the character developed and people getting to relate to the character as the story's unfolding. So I think you're excellent at that.
Thank you.
So you got your first gig with Zenescope, and were you nervous? How did it feel I'm going to write a book that, people are going to see this book?
That one actually was incredibly easy because the story was essentially plotted for me. So I really just had to break it down into, it was the Tales from Oz Cowardly Lion story. It sort of had, this is where it's starting, this is where it's ending. And all I had to do was, break it into panels and then dialogue. And I think that part was actually a really great way to start because I had seen Dave drawing for so many years before that. And so I'd been through the experience of scanning pages and seeing how a comic book page looks and understanding from his point of view what worked for the writers that he'd worked with and what didn't work from the writers that he'd worked with. So it wasn't as difficult a transition as maybe it might have been. And I guess I tend to be more of a visual, like I can see things in my head, which I wouldn't have thought was a strength of mine, but
Well, I guess it's important writing comics. You have to have it in your head when you're scripting it, sending it to the artist to give them a kind of idea.
Yeah, you have to really understand what it's going to look like on that page.
So you get the call from DC, you're going to do Wonder Woman, and you're going to do it with your husband.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, how was getting the call from DC, the big publisher? Were you excited? I mean, how was that?
At first I was excited, and then I was really nervous, and then I was pretty sure I was going to turn it down.
Really?
I think because I was such a new writer, and it's such an iconic character, and the possibility of not being successful with it, or the scrutiny that I would be under taking on that character, especially coming on after Brian Azzarello and Cliff Chen.
Right.
It was very nervous for me to even consider. And then, I thought about it, and I really, at the end of the day, what I said to myself was, I guess I'd rather fall flat on my face trying something than not trying and never knowing. And as a mom, it's kind of the lesson you always want to tell your kids, like, you need to try.
Right.
And to be fair, I did have Dave, so I'm like, even if the story's awful, it's going to be hard.
Well, it wasn't a terrible story arc at all. It was very good. And I know there's a lot of pressure on you to go into that, but I agree. The only failure is if you don't try.
Yeah.
So, and having that experience, how was it working with your husband? I mean, you don't have to scan pages or anything. You're right here. Here's the script. Do it. I mean, did you sit there and collaborate together, or?
It made me a bit of a lazy writer working with Dave, because if you're working with somebody else, you have to break it down, right? Like page 1, panel 1, and then you give a description of the panel and the dialogue, and you go through that whole thing. But I mean, I would just write sort of a plot, like this is what's going to happen, and we'd go to Tim Hortons every morning. And we'd Dave'd be like, Ma, this is about 2 or 3 pages. And then I'd say I would tell him the sort of beats I wanted included. And he'd just do these little quick thumbnail layouts, which he never does thumbnails for a comic, ever does thumbnails for a comic. But he did them for me. And we would sit there and have coffee, and he'd lay out a couple of pages, and then off he'd go. And I would say by the end, we tweaked that, and I was writing full script. I think we both found it ultimately easier, but we did start off doing sort of the Marvel way.
Well, I mean, at the same time, being new with the pressure, I'm sure, I mean, it was helpful, though, to ease you in, because it was basically just jump in the pool and swim.
It really was.
Yeah. Well, no better way to learn, right? And you got your chops, you're swimming underneath you, and you've been successful since. So that's good.
Your swim. I had a few little water wings. Dave was my
Yeah.
water wings, and I was off.
Yeah, but you know what? That's what the support system is for. And if it wasn't because he was an artist, as a husband, it would be another way.
I have to say too, DC was incredibly supportive of me during that run. I mean, Diane Nielsen said to me, "She's your character. You do with her what you want to do." Like, I didn't have constraints in the way that a lot of people might imagine you would, working on such an iconic character who has so much history in the larger universe, especially factoring in that Peter Tomasi was writing the Superman Wonder Woman story at the same time. I didn't need to worry about sort of cross-pollinating stuff. We really just did our own thing, which was very, very nice.
So working with Disney, and you worked with Zenescope before, what was the contrast, or was it similar as far as like editorial freedom and how the system worked?
I would say when you're working with a character that's been licensed from somebody else for a company, so Xena is a licensed character that Dynamite owns a license for. Similarly, Conan is a character that Marvel/Disney owns a license for. There's a few more layers of approval that everything needs to go through. So with my Xena scripts and my Conan scripts, they both had to go first through the respective publishers, and then each script had to be approved by the people who sort of oversee the entire property. So the people who own the Xena rights and the people who own Conan would have to say, yes, that script fits with how we see the character, how we see the universe, and you're not sort of straying. And they might have suggestions about things you're doing to keep it within continuity, because they have somebody that's their whole job, is to maintain, character continuity and to make sure that the artwork looks appropriate for the character and the dialogue is appropriate for the character.
Writing
It's
Xena
definitely different. There's a lot more layers.
Did writing Xena help you for Wonder Woman? I mean, there is a similarity, female protagonist, the mythology, things like that.
I would say writing Wonder Woman helped me for Xena, because I ended up doing Xena after Wonder Woman.
Oh, I thought you did it before. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I did. It was Little Mermaid, and then
Little Mermaid. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, and then it was Wonder Woman, and then I started working on Rose. I think there was a time where I was doing 3 books at one time, which is crazy. And then I also had the Light Princess that I did for K Pictures Publishing that I was working on, and that was around the Xena time Xena was kind of the last thing I did while I was finishing up Rose.
Jason Brodnick, he runs the Little Giants comic show. He just had it last week.
So sad I couldn't go. I'm so sorry, Jason.
Yeah, Jason
the border's closed, though.
Yeah, he has convention last week. It's an excellent convention for actual comic fans and art. No root beer, right, Jason? No Lego.
I was supposed to go to it, and then of course, Canada. We don't want you when the border's closed.
And Dante had said, if you could read this, thank you for the birthday gift you and David gave me in Boston. I look at it every day and appreciate you guys.
Oh, thank you. I've got a dog in my face.
That's all right. How are the dogs?
The dogs are good. This is what happens when you have a dog that's like face height.
Yeah, he's a beast. And you have a horse too, right? Or more than one horse?
Yes, I have a few horses. A couple dogs, a couple horses, regular farm.
My wife envies you. She used to ride. She loves horses.
It was one of those things that I did it all through high school, and I really just put it in a box when I went to university, and kind of felt like, even though it was a passion, it was something that wasn't going to be part of my life anymore. And you get married and you have kids, and for sure you don't have time.
Right.
Because horses take up an incredible amount of time.
A lot of care involved.
Yeah.
A lot of care. Absolutely.
So now I have horse children. Not that I don't have children too, but the children are more autonomous.
But you put them to work, right?
That's right.
Raj said, big fan of Rose. Love your work. He's a writer also. He has his own Kickstarter going on now. He was on the show Monday.
Oh, thank you so much, Raj.
And sorry, just going through a few of these. We have a question. Gravy Guzman, what's your motivation for all your novels?
Go on. I always think about in any story I'm writing, what am I going through in my own life that I'm trying to sort through and figure out? And what is the journey? How can I incorporate that into my character's journey? So I would say that on some level, all of those stories are informed by something that I've been going through in my own life. Wonder Woman was certainly about me feeling overwhelmed by starting to write on a more formal, permanent basis, while being a mother, while still managing Dave's all his art business. Hold on one second, Isaac. Can you put the dogs out, please? Life is real. And that whole feeling overwhelmed was what I brought into that Wonder Woman story, how a lot of us just feel like we have so many different parts of our life pulling on us and we can never give any one thing 100%.
Right.
And when I wrote Rose, it was because I was really trying to explore the idea of love and what is love? What is love in its purest form? And in a lot of ways at that point I was sort of exploring my faith again, and so it was a means of exploring sacrificial love, much in the same way that C.S. Lewis touched on it in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series. And so there's always something that I'm thinking about in my own life that informs whatever story I'm trying to write. And I think that's why I felt, with the Book of Ruth being the most recent story I've done, that sort of, what is faith? That's really what that book is about. It's like, what is the point of having faith? What is the purpose of faith in our life? And that was, I think, was what I was exploring in that book, and specifically through Ruth being sort of the ideal image of what faith is. And maybe I'm much more like Naomi, railing against everything. So.
Well, I remember meeting, you won't remember meeting me the first time, but I remember meeting you the first time I was going to get art from David, and I could just see how pulled apart you were. You were stressed. You were being yanked in every way, being his manager, dealing with the marketing and business part of what he was doing, trying to take care of what you were doing, obviously being a mother. And you could see you were getting tired and exhausted. It was at New York Con, and I just felt for you. I was like, oh my God, this woman's being pulled apart.
There's no better thing than when I stopped being Dave's con manager, because when you are at a convention with him, there is 1,000 people and they all want something and they're all his best friend. And I was like, and then I'm the gatekeeper. I have to say, no, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. No.
Yeah, Dave is probably the nicest person, and considering his status in the industry, he would never turn anybody away. And then some people get mad at him. It's like, listen, he's doing the best he can. Your line is out the door because he's trying not to reject you. So wait and be happy.
He never says no because he has me, although I don't have to do that anymore. Now he has Doug from Comic Sketch Art and whoever is standing beside him to say no. So that's why he never says no, because somebody else will do it for him.
Well, I have to say, though, you were speaking about Book of Ruth. I read it. I did a review. Religious or not, faith or not, it is a very inspiring story, and it shows the strength it takes to have faith. So, I mean, it takes place during the Depression, but please tell us about the Book of Ruth.
Yeah, I had that idea in my mind for quite a while. I think it was just, even when I was working on Wonder Woman, I had the idea of why couldn't there be stories like some of the stories in the Bible are amazing stories, but in a lot of ways, because of the way they're presented or the language, they feel sometimes difficult to access and difficult to understand. And why is it that all these Bible comics or Bible stories, I don't want to offend somebody, but they're not well done. I didn't feel like they were done in the way that like a modern comic would be done. Like the quality wasn't always there. And I really wanted, like, as I sat there and I thought about it, and I just had such, I just love that story. And I think a lot of people do love that story about Ruth. And it's kind of one of those, like, if you're going to read any book in the Bible, you can read that one because it's only 4 chapters. And there's not a lot of heavy language, and it seems like an easy story to read and understand. I thought that makes a lot of sense for me. And it was the one I felt really pulled toward because I have really loved that story. So, and then it came to a point in time where, I was finishing up Rose. I knew that I wasn't going to continue that. I was done with Wonder Woman, and I had pitched ideas to a few different companies, and nobody seemed to have a need for me, or what the stories I wanted to tell just weren't really jiving with what they wanted to do. So I thought this is the perfect time, and I think it's a classic example of God giving you what you need versus what you want.
Right.
And, so Dave and I had talked about it. He's like, why don't you just do Ruth? You've been talking about it forever. And so I did. And I thought, well, how am I going to ever find an artist for it? And I had approached a few of the people who I had approached previously for Rose, and I just didn't find the right artist for the book. So I thought, heck, put it out on Facebook. Let's see what happens. Who knows? And it was like the morning of the second day, I'd gone to bed. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to find anybody. This is a waste of my time. I'm not going to find anybody. I got up that morning, came downstairs, had my cup of coffee or tea, sat in front of my computer, opened my Facebook, and there it was. There was Colin's artwork. First thing I saw, and I normally let Dave sleep in because I get up at like 6. He gets up at 8 or 8:30 or 9. And I ran upstairs. I'm like, I'm sorry, I know you need to sleep in, but I need you to see this. I need you to tell me, I think this is the guy, and I need you to look at it. And so I dragged him out of bed. And he's like, yeah, he's the guy. So it all worked out.
I have to say it's Colin Dyer. Is that your name?
Yes, Colin.
And without ruining anything, I'll just show a quick interior. I think his pencils captured the mood of the book and the time period extremely well. I was very impressed. So kudos to Colin, and kudos to you for deciding to work with him, because his interiors were fantastic. I really enjoyed the aesthetic of the book as well as the inspirational message all around. I just think it was wonderful. And as I said, I got the David Finch cover because he's one of my favorite artists. But
yeah,
Lee Weeks, Billy Tucci, who's a friend of mine, and Jason Fabic, and they all have variant covers as well. But that was what was impressive to me. The pace of the story was great. It didn't ever drag. It didn't ever feel like, okay, it was smooth. It kept going. You related to the hardships on some level because we're all going through something. And then just the inspiration of it as it went on, and how strong the character, I don't want to spoil anything. So, the protagonist, how strong she was with her faith. Again, you don't, whether you're religious or spiritual or whatever the case may be, even if it's just having that strength and faith in yourself, I just thought it was a fantastic message that right now, more than anything, people need.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I think the timing was good.
I've had this conversation before. If I'd planned to write a book to come out during a pandemic, I couldn't have planned, I could have planned it. I couldn't have planned for this book to come out when it did, in terms of what's going on around the world. And again, I think that is a testament to the fact that God knows what we need even before we know we need it. And I just feel, I said this because I always write a letter in the books that are my own books. If you read Rose, there's a letter at the beginning of Rose. And if you read Ruth, there's a letter at the beginning of Ruth. And I said in the letter that I actually felt like, as I was doing this book, you sort of get an idea of, look at what I'm doing for God. I'm writing this awesome book. And then as I went through this journey with this book, I realized that that's not actually what was happening, that in fact I was being blessed more by the experience of working on the book. And I love that experience, and having that opportunity, and how your life can take these unexpected twists and turns, and when you think that it's one thing, it can be something else.
Absolutely, and we're taught humility all the time. All the time.
All the time.
Evan wanted to ask, do you have any story ideas for a character that you know is great but haven't had the chance to do yet? I'll add the word yet.
Yeah. I'm assuming Evan is talking about like characters that we know, like a Marvel character or DC character.
Well, if if it's something that you have in your mind, that character you want to create, you can tell us that too.
I think I do. Well, if I have that, I'm not going to tell you that. No.
Okay.
I think there are characters in both the Marvel and the DC universe that I would like to write at some point. Certainly in the Marvel universe, I just have this like a connection to magic. I don't think I'm spilling any secrets to say that I tend to skew toward fantasy, and most of the characters I've written have been more fantastical than superhero. Even our Wonder Woman run was very like gods and Greek gods and that kind of thing. And so I think the characters that exist in the Marvel comic universe and the DC universe tend to be those that I'm drawn to, tend to be those more less superhero characters, more fantastical characters, more flawed characters, because I think we're all just struggling to figure out our place,
mm-hmm.
and how we deal with our mistakes. So
I do think drawing from that premise, does that really help you make your characters relatable to people then? Because we're all flawed. So
I think there's that. And I really, when I'm writing a character and I'm writing script or dialogue, I really try to get into that moment. So if a character is going through like a really happy time, then I'm not necessarily feeling happy that day, then I try to put on music or do something that will really elevate my spirit, my mood, so that I'm writing that dialogue and that scene from the place that the character would be in emotionally. And similarly, if I'm writing a scene where my character is going through something really tough, if somebody walked in my front door and looked at my face, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, Meredith, what's wrong?" Because I can feel my whole face just like contorting up, and my eyes are crinkling, my mouth is sagging. I'm like, so this is the worst ever. Oh. I think that helps. I think if you're writing dialogue and you're not feeling the dialogue you're writing, I don't know. I think your reader won't feel it either. Like, I think
right.
You really need to be in that moment and
the energy has to be there.
Yeah.
What music do you listen to get you in a good mood?
Yeah, but I think I was going to say, especially in those moments that are pivotal, like those scenes where you want that reader to have that emotional like blip or beep or that feel at that moment. You need to feel it when you're writing it too.
So what music do you put on to inspire you when you need to get it uplifted?
Sometimes ABBA. I like ABBA. Fleetwood Mac.
So Dave, being a metal fan, is probably not happy when you were trying to get in a good mood.
It's so funny because he has a station in his car and I have my station in my car. And when he gets in my car, because I actually tend to listen to a lot of K-Love, which is all Christian music. It's like Christian pop. And it's all like feeling good. And I'm like jamming away. And Dave gets in the car and immediately he's like, bang, 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 trying to, he can't shut it off fast enough. And then I get into the car and he's like, rage music and blah. And I'm like, bang, 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 because I can't shut his music off fast enough. So. And then we play cards with our friends and we all go around the table and everybody picks a song. And you try to like modify our picks to a certain extent so that Dave doesn't play really heavy rage music. And I don't play something like, that's when I might play more Fleetwood Mac or, ELO. If anybody is old enough to know who ELO is.
I know ELO, Electric Light Orchestra.
Yes.
Big fan.
My dad played that all the time. The puppy's crying. Hear him crying.
It's okay. Take care. You gotta take care of him.
Hear him crying at the door. Please let me in. It's been the worst day for him because we had thunderstorms all day here.
Oh, really?
And he's like, oh my gosh, there's like loud noise outside. I can't go outside. And he's actually he's been potty trained for like a month and a half. He's peed in the house twice today because of the thunderstorms and the pouring. Like he's like, I can't go outside in this. This isn't my whole world. The sky's falling down. He's like Chicken Little today.
Aw. I remember my dog with the 4th of July fireworks. It was a mess. So Keith Brunswick says hi. Dan Lee says, sup, Meredith.
Hey, Dan.
Dan rolls like that. Del Guzman wanted to ask you, so is woman empowerment a big part of your reasoning behind your writing your books? Which goes to what I was going to ask you, that you usually write strong female protagonists, other than Conan, of course. So is that a preference, and is it for woman empowerment, or is it just what you relate to?
No, when I'm writing my female characters, I'm not thinking I need to write a strong woman. I'm thinking I'm just writing women. I'm writing women that I know. Like I don't have an agenda when I'm writing. I'm just writing. I had my grandmother was a war bride. My mom is a strong person. My nanny was, an entrepreneur, a stay-at-home entrepreneur when my dad was growing up. Like, I just come from a place where the women in my family just do what you want to do. And so when I'm writing my stories, I'm not thinking I need to prove anything. Right. I think maybe that's why people connect with the characters I'm writing, because I'm just writing the women. Like, I'm sampling parts of the women that I know in my life, and I think that's why they feel really authentic. Because I'm not coming at it from an agenda. I never grew up feeling like there was anything I couldn't do. I felt like I could always do whatever I wanted to do. And so that's really how I approach my characters. And when I am thinking about a character, I'm thinking less about, their gender and more about what's the story, what's the journey that this person is going to take in this story. And I think I've been very blessed. I've had amazingly strong female characters to work with, but I also made them weak. Like, I'm Wonder Woman cried, and I got even when Dave did it, I was like, no, we can't make Wonder Woman cry. I don't know. Like, we're gonna make her cry. Gonna be fine.
Well, sometimes the internal conflict is actually the most challenging for the hero than the antagonist. But when you wrote Conan, when you got the call for Conan from Marvel, were you thinking, ooh, I went from writing a lot of strong female protagonists to this pretty much pig? He's a barbarian who just takes what he wants, how he wants it, when he wants it, and that's a big contrast from the characters that you usually write.
It is, but it was fun too, because I live in a house of men. Like, I have 3 boys and a husband, and sometimes, like, I think people get so caught up in comics meaning something that they forget sometimes that comics can be fun. And that was really just the point of the story. Like, who is Conan at his heart? Like, who did he write him to be? He's not really a chauvinist. He treats both men and women badly equally. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you're a guy and he has no respect for you, he treats you like crap. And if you're a girl and he has no respect for you, he treats you like crap too. He's going to kill a woman just as easily as he would kill a man. And so I never, ever felt with Conan that I was, not being fair to women or that I was writing something that wasn't respectful, because he really, he loved Valeria. He respected her and thought she was, could kick his butt.
He put her on a goddess pedestal. Yeah.
Yeah, he really did. So it was just fun to have some fun with that character. And that's one of the things with, just by the nature of the stories that I write, I tend to not write a lot of hacking and slashing, and punching. And so it was fun to do something that was just like what I see in my living room every single day.
Well, I think it's a great approach too, because I mean, men, women, we all feel a lot of the same things. We go through a lot of the same things. We may handle them differently from time to time, but when you start trying to categorize and put something in a box, not only are you limiting how you write, but now you're not really relating to everybody on a realistic level. So I think that's a great attitude going into writing. By the way, my 8 and my 6 year, this is my mother, and my 8 and my 6-year-old went to bed, but they wanted to say hi to you. I didn't bring them on camera, but they were like, "Tell her hello." So if you see me looking away while you're talking to me, it's because they're in the doorway going, "Tell her hi, tell her hi."
Hi.
I want them to read the Book of Ruth. The only reason why I didn't yet was the one scene in the tub.
Yeah.
That was the only thing but I'm going to work around that, and I want them to check out the book. I'm going to have it read with them at night for that. So.
Yeah, I felt like the one scene that I felt like if anybody was like, "Oh, can my kid read it?" I did try to make that book very authentic to the things that she would have gone through, or any woman would have gone through, who was alone and vulnerable. And so that was part of why I introduced the character of Levi, because I wanted people to understand that she was in a very precarious position, and she put herself out there into a very dangerous situation because of her faith, and this was how God protected her.
Right.
Why Boaz was so important in the story, but I did feel like because of that little bit of aggression and intimidation, that might be a situation where it wouldn't be like a G or an E for everyone.
Well, it was told in a good way where I don't think it was harsh at all. Like I said, it was just that one scene, but at the same time, the one scene totally makes sense during the Depression, and with that character and what their loss.
Oh, and the suicide, yeah.
In the tub, yeah, the suicide. Yeah. So
I totally forgot about that scene. I'm like, oh, don't even think about that.
Yeah, that was the only thing. That was the only one visually, because then questions coming up with the kids. So I'll work around that panel on that page, but at the same time, it was realistic.
Together.
Yeah. Oh, they're stuck.
Yeah.
But,
that one.
Keith wanted to ask you, what's the one character or team you do want to write next?
So I have a couple of things I want to write next. Dave has been talking a lot about working on a book together, so that would be a creator-owned project.
Nice.
And I'm also talking to Colin about doing another biblical adaptation.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. So that will probably be the one I start like next. And then I'm talking to another publisher to see if we can find a character. They offered me one character, and I didn't feel like it was a good fit for me. And I'm very blessed to be in a situation where I can say that character isn't a good fit for me, and I don't know that I could really add something to him or her. So, but I'm sure we'll find something that works. But, you know, it's nice to feel, for me, to feel like I'm ready to write again, because after Ruth came out in the Kickstarter, I actually went through a period of time where I thought, and I told people, I was at conventions, I'm like, I've retired. I'm all done writing. I'm just going to ride my horses and raise my kids, and maybe I'll blog a little bit here and there, but I'm all done with comics. And I was genuinely all done with comics. And, you know, it's been certainly a journey for me through this, through the COVID-19 season. Is that what we can call it? I mean, because it has been a season where I really have come back to a place where I have ideas about what I want to say again, and I have stories that I want to tell again, and I'm excited to start writing again. So,
well, the best stories are going to come out when you feel inspired.
Yeah.
Period. So yeah, you got to. If you need that break, you need that break. I mean, I don't know you well, but we've spoken from time to time, and reading your blogs that you would put up, you're very forthcoming and honest about your travels and your trials that you're going through, and which I think is refreshing, to be honest with you, to be that forward. A lot of people have a celebrity status now, writers and artists, etc. And for you to expose yourself and show that vulnerable side of being human, I think is a sense of strength, but it also really just endears people to you, and I think it makes us relate. As you and I have spoken before, your blogs a couple of times, I mean, they hit home for what I was going through, and it made me feel, connected to the message, connected to the inspiration that you put out there, and I thought they were great. So,
Thank you.
yeah, and I think that's a fantastic thing you're doing, whether it's God talking through you or you talking on behalf of God, whatever it is. It's a wonderful thing.
I hope it's divine intervention. Sometimes I read my dialogue and I'm like, wow, that's really good. Who wrote that? Back and I'm like, that must have been the editor. The editor must have done that dialogue. And I'll go back. I'm like, oh no, I actually wrote that. I don't know how I wrote that, but I wrote that. So I hope in some of the things, I hope in everything that I do, that I can help. If anything I do helps people find their own faith or answer a question that they're struggling with. I certainly, in all of my writing and in my blogging, I want to be honest, I certainly don't think of myself as a celebrity. Dave and I don't raising our kids, we're going through all the same things. And just instead of being a teacher, I'm a writer. And so, our audience, instead of a classroom of kids, is a group of people who read comics. And I think that if you're not honest, then what's the point if you're writing? Right. And people are very smart, readers are very smart, and they know the people who aren't honest. They recognize insincerity when they read it. I recognize it when you recognize it when you watch it on TV. It's why the best actors are who they are, because they give you that feeling of sincerity. They don't feel like they're acting. They feel like they're the character. And I think that nothing else, if I can continue to be honest, just in my writing and my work, then hopefully people will respond to that.
Well, as long as you keep drawing from relatable things about what you're feeling and thinking and everything, I'm sure that'll be the case, because we all go through a lot of the same things without realizing it. So I think that is a strength on your part. And I do agree with you. People know when the writer is just writing or when the writer is expressing. Yeah. Steve Garcia. Hi, Meredith. Totally appreciate both you and Dave. As a visual artist, we often do warm-up sketches before getting started on things. I've often wondered if writers have any sort of warm-up routines that they do, and if they do, what are they?
So I don't have any warm-up routines, but what I do is, if I have a problem I have a couple things I do. So first of all, if I have a problem that I'm struggling with in a script, then the thing I'll most likely do is go do something like ironing or go for a drive, because it's those sort of like that little bit of a mundane task where you can work that problem in the back of your brain while you're doing something else in the front of your brain. Seems to really be a way for my brain to process and problem solve and come up with story ideas within a script. And then the other thing that I tend to do, which maybe a warm-up, is I write things by hand. So if I know exactly what I'm doing with the script, then I'm on my computer. But if I'm taking notes or thinking about it, trying to figure out how the story is going to go, if I'm struggling with dialogue, I'll journal as that character. I did that quite a bit with Rose. Just because if I was kind of coming back and forth into dialogue, I want to make sure I was in the character. And I found just journaling as that character. Here's how I'm feeling. This is what's been happening to me. I can't believe it, or oh my gosh. And that really helps. So I guess those are kind of like warm-up strategies I use. And I think it's because both the ironing and the handwriting sort of slow your brain down and give you a little bit of time to process and think and balance yourself. But if you know what you're saying, then full speed ahead on the keyboard.
Phil Lockhart has his own talk show as well. He said, "Evening, Meredith."
Hi, Phil.
Viraj wanted to ask, or Veer, do you research a certain area before you start writing? For example, mythology is so vast. How do you go about writing about that subject? Will you take different aspects from the different mythos to write fiction? I guess, like, for example, Wonder Woman, Greek mythology.
Absolutely, I did. Absolutely. When I was writing Wonder Woman, I did a lot of research on Greek mythology. Don't ask me any of it now because I filed that in the far recesses. They're like back here. I don't know. It might take a week to get access to that information again. But absolutely, before I do anything, when I was working on Xena, I rewatched a bunch of Xena stuff and I looked into fighting. And again, that's very Greek, based on the Greek gods and the Roman gods. And I think that's part of what, again, with your readers, it's part about being honest and presenting your character in an environment that feels real and makes sense. Like, if you haven't done your homework, how can you expect to present your character in a way that your readers, who, quite frankly, they're probably not the first writer of that character that they're reading. So if you haven't done your homework, then I think that, again, it's disrespectful to the character and to the reader.
And I'm sure, especially in the case of Wonder Woman, a lot of people know about Greek mythology as well. So they're going to know if you're way off.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you say if she's fighting Odin, they're going to be like, wait a minute, I think something's a little off here. Someone didn't do their work.
The only good thing about the Wonder Woman that we did was that it was the new 52. And so I really just need to know Wonder Woman, but I really needed to know the Brian Azzarello Wonder Woman. Like, where was this Wonder Woman in the DCU and where could I take her?
Right. Yeah, because he was predecessor. So you can't you have to keep continuity as best as possible.
Well, and when you're coming after somebody who left who gave you such a great sandbox, why wouldn't you play in it?
Right. That's true, too. Russell Allen just want to say it's great to be a positive light in the world today. We need more of that to drown out the negativity social media crams down our throats. Fight back. Hashtag inspiration. Russell, you're absolutely right, my friend. I agree 100%. Vera asked you, what is your favorite mythos then?
Am I allowed to say C.S. Lewis now? I love fantasy. So I wouldn't say like I'm a big fan of Greek mythology. If I'm a fan of anything, actually, it's English history. Like, I love, that's not really the myth, but like I love reading about Henry VIII and the War of the Roses and Victoria and those kinds of things, I guess, are my mythos, for lack of a better word. They're the thing that I love to research and explore and read about, which is, again, feels like fantasy, really, when we look back at that now, even though it was history. It's that whole dress up and exploring and living in a different time period in a different world than we live in now.
In a way, it is fantasy because we're not drawing from personal experience. So it's stories we heard. Speaking of fantasy and mythos, though, you created your own with Rose. What was it, 17 issues, right? Mm-hmm. So can you tell us what inspired you to write that and what that's about? And will you be continuing that? Will you be doing something with that in the future?
Certainly, Rose was my love letter to C.S. Lewis because I am a huge C.S. Lewis fan. And not just his Narnia series, but also his Christian writings. And C.S. Lewis, Anne McCaffrey, David Eddings, all of those people they wrote the stories I grew up on, and I wanted to have the chance. When I say I always thought I'd write a book, that's what I always thought I'd do. I always thought I'd write a fantasy fiction book, and I'd be able to do what they did. And so that was really what I was trying to accomplish with Rose, was create my own world and my own, like, it's a lot harder than you think it's going to be when you say you're going to create your own world, because you got to figure out, like, what can you do and what can't you do, and what are the boundaries and parameters. With Wonder Woman, when it's your own world, you kind of are making it up as you go along.
Right.
I think what was very helpful for me, or important for me, was even though I gave myself freedom to meander on that book and take the journey and allow the characters to talk to me as they developed, and some of them really developed very differently than I anticipated as we went along. I always knew where I was going to end up. I always knew what the beginning was going to be. I always knew what the ending would be for that book. So, but the character of Dante, I had no idea he was going to end up being, this kind of lovable guy who just struggled within himself to be reconciled with who he had been and who he wanted to be because of the person he was with.
Well, I think some of the best writing and why you're relatable too, though, is if you can script the character out, but then the progression of the character is scripted, it lacks a natural progression. But you just said that the character evolved in a way that you didn't anticipate. Well, that's great writing, because then it's very natural. It's the story and the experiences are making the character evolve into what they evolve in, and I think that has a more natural effect on the reader. So that would probably attribute to your success, because it's not this planned out thing per se, where every consequence, every reaction is plotted. It's a nice natural progression, and it's probably from drawing from yourself in some cases too, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would say that within any story, you need to have the spine. Like, you absolutely need to have the framework that you're going to hang it on, but then it's okay to wind your way around that spine, as long as, and I think this is key, you always keep in mind the theme of your book, like what's the point of your story, and trying to make sure that those journeys, those different paths you take, at some point lead you back to that theme. And I think that's where you can give yourself the freedom, as long as you make sure you're ultimately, all of those paths are consistent with what you're trying to say.
Bill Field wanted to ask you, are you a Dickens fan?
I am. A Tale of Two Cities is my favorite, though.
Yeah, it's my wife's too, actually.
I just loved it. I love it. I've tried to get my kid to read it, my 16-year-old. I'm like, you should read this book. It's so good. He's like,
how's that working out?
Can I shoot it? Is it like Fortnite? No, it's not.
Gallo Romero, I take it you didn't collect comics. How do you voice comic characters that have a long history and established canon without upsetting the fan base?
So I did not collect comics as a kid. In fact, my only exposure to comics was when I would go to my grandmother's houses. So my mother's mother had all girls, so I would go, and when we would visit, they would have romance comics, which almost nobody's heard of, but they used to have them. And then when I go to my dad's mom, they would have like maybe the occasional Hulk or Superman or Batman. They didn't have Batman. They had Marvel stuff mostly. And then they had Archie comics. So I could always read an Archie comic. And that's when Dave told me, when I met Dave and he told me he worked in comics, I was like, oh, like in the newspaper? Like, which strip do you do? He's like, no, not like in the newspaper. And it is such an ongoing joke for us, because when on our first date, he actually, as we were leaving the restaurant, he's like, oh, my car's right here. If you like, I can give you a couple of comics so you can see what I do. And he happened to have them in his trunk. Now, I don't know, maybe I held back far enough that he couldn't push me into the trunk, but but he gave me a couple comics, and I went home. And I always joke, he really wasn't thinking, because he gave me the Avengers Disassembled, where She-Hulk is ripping the Vision in two. And I'm like, I have kids at this point. I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Do I really want to date a guy whose brain came up with this image. But,
Well, tell Dave I'll date him if he wants to give me some signed comic books out of his trunk. You know, it's not a problem. I'll take it away.
As you can see, that we've been together for 15 or so years, so I did give him the chance. I'm like,
he made it past the comic book test. Nice.
Past the comic book test. That was actually a fail on his part. He's lucky. That giving me the comics was probably a fail. I was like, ooh, that was like step down versus up.
Well, how did he redeem himself? That's the question. You have to give some advice to some people.
He took me to a really nice restaurant. And then he seemed like such a nice guy. I'm like, I don't like, it didn't make sense. I'm like, how is this nice guy doing this stuff? So I think that was like question number 1 on the next date. What's up with this?
What's up with the violence? And then when you find out what he listens to, you're like, wait a minute, you're such a soft-spoken guy. What's with the music and the ripping up androids? And
yeah, I don't think he told me he liked heavy metal back then.
Oh, okay. So he was smart. He eased you in. He was
smart enough in that way, yeah.
Bill wanted to ask, have you ever read any Chesterton? He was a friend and influence on Lewis.
I feel so remiss because I actually haven't read Chesterton. I've read George MacDonald, who actually was a huge influence on, C.S. Lewis credits MacDonald with baptizing his imagination because of his book Phantastes. I haven't read Chesterton. And I feel like it's on my, like, you know, when you keep that list of ways in your life you're failing, that's on my list of ways in my life where I'm like, I really need to do that. It's not good. It's not good. But I didn't do a degree in English literature. I actually have a degree in ecology and evolution. So all of my reading has come about as they've been pursued in my own time versus like a formal literature education where somebody would be like, oh yeah, I read, you know, everybody. I'm like, oh yeah, because you get together with writers and they're all like, oh, I read so and so. I'm like, yeah, I read C.S. Lewis when I was 12.
So if we get you back on the show, Bill will have to follow up and see if you got on that at all.
Yeah.
If you've tackled that list.
If he has a recommendation for which
any recommendations, Bill?
Chesterton book I should read first, I would totally take that.
By the way, Bill is also producer on the show. He posts my links for me, so thank you, Bill. I appreciate that.
Oh, that was like I'm gonna get her question.
Hi, Meredith. Sorry, English bad. Do you find harder to create something new and fresh for already established character like the Wonder Woman, or more hard for original creation starting at origin? You had touched on this before, but I just want to address the question.
Yeah, no, I think there are positive and negatives to both. So when you're working on a character like Wonder Woman, you know that at the Wonder Woman that I wrote, I knew her, she was a god of war. I knew she could fly. I knew she had the lasso of truth. I knew that she was dating Superman. Like, I knew, you know, a bunch of different things about her as a character. And I knew what she could and couldn't do and the world in which she lived. So it gave, like, I could play within that world, but I couldn't go necessarily outside that world. Versus writing a character like Rose, that's my own character, you almost have too much choice. So very early on, you have to sit down and say, this can happen, this can't happen. This can, yes to this, no to this. Like, you have to draw yourself a box very early on that your character is going to be within. And then if you decide, like, you do have the option of taking your character outside of that box because it's your own character, but you need to decide, is it still maintaining the integrity of my character to do that? And is there a good reason for me to do that?
Right.
So there really are, like, you get a lot from both, I think. I tend to hate to get permission for stuff, so that's why I've been doing more creator-owned stuff, because I'm like, I just want to do my own thing. Why do I need permission?
Well, this is the time to do it. I mean, indie comics are big right now. This is the
Seems
time
like
to really be your own creator. Thanks for the question, Riddler. Appreciate it. So, being that you weren't into comics, do you read comics at all now that you're a writer of comics, or do you not have time?
it's embarrassing. I don't even read the newspaper. So I get up in the morning, I have my cup of tea, which is usually the time I do my Bible study. And then like I'm usually at the house by 7:15 because I'm up at 5 and I'm at the barn. And so yeah. So I'm at the barn by like, it takes half an hour to get there, by 7:45. And I usually am out there for a good 3 hours, come home. By that point, the babysitter's leaving. And then I've got, Isaac for the day. And then I've got Isaac for the rest of the afternoon, or I'm driving Everett here, or I have 2 dogs, so the house needs to be swept, or groceries need to get, or laundry needs to be done. So I'm looking forward to school going back. Also, I've homeschooled Isaac, our youngest, for the last 2 years.
Oh, really? While juggling all this, how are you doing that, my lord?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's why these stories come like Wonder Woman, where I'm like, I don't have time for anything. So I don't have as much time as I would like to devote to more academic pursuits. I find like Dave has his office in the basement because it's quiet. I can't write and think about writing when somebody's going to come down and make toast every half an hour, or somebody sitting on the other side of the room is like, Mom, hey, did you see the latest Fortnite emote? Or can you make me lunch? The dog wants out. I can't. It's not an environment that's conducive for me to work, and I'm not a night person. Like you're lucky you got me at 9. Like normally I'm asleep on the couch by 8:30. Once dinner's done, I turn out the lights, like the brain light goes off. That's it for the day. So,
well, God knows if you're up at 5 in the morning. Caesar Crawford said, "Hey Meredith."
Hey Caesar.
Your cabinets in the back look like the fish, the Jesus fish. So
not on purpose, but yeah. I've just incorporated it in all of my life. I'm one of those.
Gallo had asked, which heroine, in your opinion, is characterized most like a real modern woman? I don't know if I know what that modern woman term or what that means, but
I think they all are to a certain extent. Like I certainly felt like our Wonder Woman was very relatable for a lot of women who read that book. In my own characters, I do feel like I can give the books like Ruth or Rose to my girlfriends, and they'll actually enjoy reading them because they can see aspects of themselves in those characters. It's a tough question, and because I don't have the time to read a lot of other comics, I don't know that I could speak to what other people are doing with characters right now, and people are so diverse in general. That's part of the reason why comics are so diverse and characters are so diverse. So for me to decide what my version of a modern woman is versus somebody might be completely different than somebody else's.
Right. Now you're part of the industry, of course, you've met a lot of people. Have you, being that you didn't read comics, you probably weren't fangirling or impressed with people you've met, but are there any creators that you've met that you've become really admired and respected their body of work, and on that level, maybe as a writer, you're kind of a little, awestruck?
Jay Lee. I am such a huge, Jay's my friend, but before Jay was my friend, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Jay Lee. Like, how can I talk to him because it's Jay Lee? And there's just something about Jay's artwork that it's so very, very different from Dave. And he just I watched him work, and it's like magic. Like I watch Dave work, and I know people feel like that with Dave, and so Jay's the guy that if I was like have any one person that I could work with on a project that would be like my holy grail, Jay's the guy. Jay.
So you got to get on it. Pitch him something and get on that. Let's go. Come on, Jay Lee, Meredith Finch.
Jay knows too. I'm like, I love you, Jay. I'm telling you, you're the greatest, Jay.
He's probably not watching this show, unfortunately, right now. But you know what? Maybe we'll get him on the show one day.
Hashtag him. Hashtag Finch loves Jay.
All right, I'll do that. Have you ever had any convention moments that stood out, whether they were positive and or crazy, or just absolutely weird or outlandish?
The weirdest convention moment I could ever say we was we've started taking friends with us sometimes to conventions just to make it fun, keep it interesting. Dave and I get bored of each other. We live together, work together, travel together. It's like, oh, we have like peace from each other. So we started bringing some friends. See, there we go. Jay Lee, Meredith Finch. There we go. We should start a petition. So we went to a comic book convention with friends of ours, and we checked into the hotel. And to say the hotel was maybe not up to sort of what we might have expected, and then to know that we had brought our friends to this hotel that was really not up to what we expected. Dave's like, I can't stay here. How can I do this? And so we ended up, the hotel had like, each hotel room had a door. So we went out for dinner, and then Dave was driving because we'd rented a vehicle to get around because it's a big place. We ended up after dinner ending up at a Hilton Garden Inn, where Dave then checked us in, and then we snuck back to the hotel for the convention and snuck our bags out, and then stayed at the Hilton Garden Inn and just drove to the convention every day.
Oh,
so
wow.
That would be like the craziest. They were such lovely people, and I would never say where it was, but it just maybe I didn't feel like I wanted to sleep in the hotel. I don't want people to think I'm snotty.
No, there were some. No, I understand. As a convention owner and promoter, I vet every hotel because from the outside they look very nice, the lobbies. And as a convention promoter, if you don't actually inspect the rooms, you might be surprised at what you find. So it's not you being snotty. It's
a bucket in the tub with water dripping into the.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I vet every hotel.
Damp. It was very damp. It's not like I felt like I was going to have a lovely convention, though. Lovely convention. So I won't say anything. The convention was fabulous, but the hotel, we had a lot of fun at the Garden Inn, though. That was Dave's first hot tub experience ever. Apparently, prior to that, he had never been in a hot tub before, and now he's in love.
So you got to get one.
Yes. It's on the to-do list.
Everybody okay?
Yeah, that would be the teenager. Going for the fridge.
Well, you got to blame. That's why you have dogs. Blame it on the dog.
Yeah, nothing. It wasn't a mess. Just the container. He tried so hard to catch it too. He's like,
That's all right. This is a casual sit down. We're good.
Look, at this point, anybody who talks to me, if you're on because we do our live stream on Monday nights, life is real. Like,
by the way, I didn't want to plug that because that's David's art stream, but that is a very entertaining show, and you do a lot of work managing the chat room on that show. So thanks for that.
You can plug that because my name's on the title. It's Meredith and Dave's Monday Night Drop.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, you manage hundreds of people in that chat room. I mean, the chat is just constantly going down in milliseconds, and she's on top of everything. So you do a wonderful job on that chat room and helping David with everything else while he's trying to draw. So check them out. It's a YouTube channel. I'm sure everybody here already knows, but if you want to plug that as well.
Hold on. Everett, are you going to leave that fridge door open all night?
Everett can come say hello too. He's welcome to come on and say hi.
I was quieting the dog.
You want him to say hi. He doesn't want to say hi because that hair right now, it's not camera ready.
Nice.
It's normally good, but it's not. I'm not wrong. It's not camera ready.
So we have another question from Caesar. Do you do voice for text to text for writing? I'm just curious because I have a sister-in-law that does that.
I do not, because I can't talk fast enough to keep up with my brain. That's why that's why I write. Like when I'm writing like freehand, I probably could keep like talk what I'm writing. But when I'm typing, like when I'm in the zone and I'm typing the script and laying stuff out, there's absolutely no way that I could talk fast enough to keep up with the ideas as they're coming out.
I apologize. Geraldo Borges, the Brazilian artist, he had asked earlier, what can we expect a new comic book project by the Finches? And Meredith had said before, her and David have talked about doing a creator-owned project, but there's nothing to tell us at this point.
There isn't. No, he's finishing up a project that he's been working on for over 2 years right now. He's still working on it. And then we'll sort of see, we will do something together at some point, because we're always talking about it, and I think we have an idea, but I couldn't say a date. Will I have something out in the next year? For sure, I think I will. I don't know if that will be a book with Colin or with one of a publisher, or I wouldn't say in the next year that would be with Dave.
Back to the convention talk. Any interesting, crazy, or wonderful fan experiences?
Every experience at a convention is an amazing fan experience. That is why I go to conventions, because when you're an artist, you always have a lineup because people want to see you draw, but when you're a writer, you're not doing anything cool other than sitting there and signing books. And having people come up and tell me their stories about how my characters or my stories have touched them and influenced them and how much they mean to them is the best part of my job. It's the reason why I write, and I love it. So I haven't had a bad fan experience at a convention. I hope I never do. I couldn't imagine having a bad fan experience, because all of the people who come up are amazing people. And I know Dave and I both really miss not being able to go to conventions right now.
Yeah, well, I hope to see you guys soon. Not just at my convention, but any convention. It's always a pleasure to see you guys.
We're like tentatively scheduled for a couple next year, but who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't even know when mine is going to go on yet. I want it to be safe and everybody to be comfortable. And plus, like you have travel restrictions right now, so we don't even know what's going to happen.
And then we have to factor in, if we both went to a convention, do we both have, I don't know how we would live if we both then had to quarantine for 14 days and we got home. I don't even
can't do that. You have kids to take care of.
Right. I don't see us even doing conventions together, or me doing conventions in the near future. I think it would be Dave going out there, because you can do more at a convention as an artist, and then I might do a few small shows. But
well, I'm a small show.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
No, I totally get it. And honestly, I'm probably not going to be till 2022 at this point, just because proper time to prep the show. But again, there's so many working parts that I don't think it's good to commit right now with everything going on.
Yeah. Well, and I owe Jason. I owe him an appearance because I was supposed to be at the show this weekend. So.
Yeah. Well, his show went well from what I heard, and I'm glad. But these larger shows, it's impossible to cram 20,000, 100,000 people in there, and I don't see it happening. So having said that, with conventions, how do you feel about the virtual conventions that are going on? Have you seen any of them? Have you attended any of them?
No. I'm so bad. I'm people will send me the email hey, we're doing this virtual convention. Do you want to be a part? I'm oh yeah, and then I'm so busy. I'm so tired. I'm so tired this summer. I'm what? I said that to Dave yesterday. I'm why am I so tired? Maybe because I'm getting up at 5 every day, but
You also overcame, I mean, not to get into your personal business, you also overcame, an injury, and I'm glad to see everything well with that, and you're back on the horse figuratively and literally.
Yeah, and literally. Yeah,
So
actually,
good for you.
It's hard to believe it was over a year ago.
It went fast. I can't believe it.
And the thumb doesn't quite work like it used to. It's not.
So your hitchhiking days are over.
My hitchhiking days are over. It doesn't bend the same way, and the shoulder, I can, like, if I sleep on it the wrong way, I can sometimes feel it. But
it's good that you're only 25, so you have time to heal. And
I'm so young. I wouldn't want to be 25 again. I would not want to be 25 again. There's something really amazing about being at a place in your life where you know who you are and you're comfortable with who you are, and you don't need somebody else's approval. I'm sure there are people who get there far earlier than I did, but I'm very much enjoying this time where my kids are older and we can interact and hang out and yeah.
Well, you just recently had a birthday, and we were discussing this, and I agree. My life actually didn't start until my late 30s, and the wisdom that comes with it, and the self-confidence that comes with it, and the comfort in your own self. The only thing I'd say is I wouldn't mind the 20-year-old body again. That's about it. I always leave off with this last question for all my guests while we're on the subject. If you could go back in time to your younger self, and it could be in regards to your career mostly, or even just, your growing up and the wisdom that you have now to share with yourself, what advice would you give yourself?
It's a tough question to ask, because I wouldn't want to give myself advice that would change the course of my life as I've lived it. Because I feel like all of the mistakes and failures and heartbreak that I've gone through have made me into the person that I am right now.
I love that answer, by the way, because that's how I feel.
Yeah.
I don't regret any mistake. I don't regret any bad thing that happened, because it taught us.
Yeah.
You don't learn from the good. You learn from the bad, because you have to be shifted out of your comfort zone to progress.
So I guess, Philip, if I was going to say one thing, I would say just keep loving people. Just keep loving people. Because at the end of the day, if you give somebody love unconditionally and you get hurt, you know that hurt isn't a failure on your part. It's a failure on their part. And when you're honest and sincere and genuine, I think you never have to apologize and be ashamed for feeling and giving to somebody. And that's it's sort of the pep talk I gave myself when I started dating again. Because sometimes people use I've been hurt before, so I don't want to be hurt again. But if you can't open yourself up to being loved and loving, then you'll never experience that love. It's kind of in order to know great love, you have to be willing to also experience a great pain. You can't have one without the other.
I agree.
So.
I think pride gets in the way sometimes too. Touching on what you said, sometimes when we give of ourselves, or if we give something to somebody and we wind up feeling like we were swindled or we cheated, that's our pride being affected. And we don't look at it like you said. Look, that's about their character flaw, not mine. Mine was an altruistic thing that I tried to do right. So how could that be a thing to be ashamed of or look bad on? Yeah. Shame on them, not you. So I agree with you. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Meredith before we say goodnight? And I do want to tell you, I often say this to Meredith, that I probably make her feel pressured, and I feel bad if I do. Meredith, from time to time, puts up her blogs on her Facebook page. And I always look forward to reading them, because they are very inspiring, and at time, and again, I'm a person of great faith as well. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not well Bible versed, but I have a great deal of faith in God. I recognize when he's talking to me and everything he's done for me. But when I mean, it's very crazy. It's very funny how every time you blog something, almost every time it really pertains to what I'm going through on some level. It's right there. And I've been inspired a lot by your blogs, and I do appreciate that. So, forgive me if I send you a message saying, where are the blogs? What happened to the blogs? But I mean, I really do feel that way. And it's actually, I have a great respect for your faith, for the strength it takes to put yourself out there and make yourself vulnerable. That is not easy. It's also very strong in today's age to show your faith, Christianity, the way you do. So please keep it up. There are a lot of us that appreciate it. And when you are feeling a little weak or a little down, know that your blogs have touched some people, and we do appreciate it, and I am thankful for it. So please know that, and I was happy that you came on the show. I was hoping you would say yes. I was probably going to hound the hell out of you and annoy you until you did. So you might as well get it over with.
Oh, you're all over my Facebook page, so I knew if I didn't say yes, I was never going away.
But I do appreciate that. I'm unfortunately a stubborn Irishman. I'm a little bit of a pit bull one. That's why I have such a fantastic family, because I don't quit.
You know what? It takes one to know one. I apologize to somebody today. I'm like, I don't want you to think that, you're like, oh no, it's that Meredith person calling in. But I'm an advocate for my kids, and that's my job. So I'm going to be all over you. I'm sorry. It's just who I am till I get what I want.
And remember, we have to do the hashtag. We got to talk to Jay Lee, everybody. You have to flood Jay Lee's page. Say, listen, you need to work with Meredith because we say so. We, the fans, demand it.
Meredith wants Jay.
Gallows, and I apologize, Gallo. Gallo's been asking constantly. He wants to see the puppy before we go. By the way, the puppy could be ridden. You could put a saddle on that dog.
Well, the dog certainly could be. The puppy, maybe not so much.
Oh, that's true.
If I can get Eve over here. Eve, come. Eve, come. Come on. Come on, Eve. Good girl. Come on. Come on. Come on. Oh, they're both going to come. Such good dogs. Who's a good girl? Yes, she is. Here, this is Eve.
Oh, look at the puppy.
Let me.
Hi.
Wait, and there's
the puppy. Aw.
There's the puppy. They're like, oh, what, you don't.
What type of dog is
you don't have a treat for me? What the heck? That's it. That's all I got. You just want to show me off on camera?
And what type of dogs are they?
Yeah, they're Irish Wolfhounds.
Nice. I'm Irish, so there you go. I'm cool.
Yeah, so she's like just over 100 pounds. I think should be like 120 when she finishes growing, and they might be like in the 150.
Oh my Lord! Wow. Okay, so you'll have to put them in the barn with the horses.
Yeah, they'll have their own stall. Stall for the horse and stall for the dog.
Well, Meredith, thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate you taking the time, especially since you would have been in bed by now. It was a great pleasure talking with you.
Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you. I really enjoyed the Book of Ruth. Again, I want to show everybody, if it's not in your local comic shop, ask for it. This is the David Finch cover, but there are some other great covers as well. Very inspirational. A time like this, people feeling down, depressed, feeling like things aren't working out. I really recommend reading the book. And go back through her page and look at her blogs. I think you'll find a little inspiration there. And obviously follow. You can see Facebook and Instagram on the bottom there.
And I think my Twitter is at Finch Meredith 1 too. So it's just Finch Meredith 1. There you go. You'll find me.
Okay. And, keep looking for updates too on any projects she has coming up. And every Monday, it's Sunday and Monday, isn't it? Or did it move to Monday?
We were doing Sundays, and now we move it to Mondays. Yeah.
Okay, Mondays YouTube. Her and David have the show. David does art tutorial, and Meredith is very, very, very involved in the chat room. So
you hear me in the background. It's like hanging with the Finches. That's basically what the night is.
That's what you should just call it. Hanging with the Finches. Meredith, God bless you. Thank you for everything. God bless you and your family. And I will be seeing you on your Facebook.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for coming out.
Have a great night.
Thanks, you too.
So that was another episode. Thank you, Meredith, for coming in. It was a great pleasure talking to her. She's a wonderful person. Every time I see her at a show, I try not to bother her because she's usually very busy, but it's great talking with her. Thanks, everybody, for coming out as usual. My Rogues Gallery. I want to make a few announcements. Sean Chen will be on Tuesday, and he will be having a one-day sale on that day for his own creator-owned book that I own, and it's fantastic. So please come out to see that show and pick up his book. Go to his Instagram to find out about it. I am going to be doing some giveaways of some nice things, prints and comic books and everything. So keep an ear out for future shows when I'm doing giveaways. And as always, I want to tell you guys, thank you for your support. Thank you for participating. This show is about giving exposure to artists and writers and creators during this time and giving the fans a fun experience, and you guys make the show what it is by continuing to support and engage, and I really appreciate it. So you guys have a great night. God bless you, and I'll leave you with what I always leave you. Have fun storming the castle.